It's all right. No mai haere mai, kia ora everybody. Welcome to this hui, ki tēnei hui, transport, public transport and active transport. So we'll get ourselves open and I'll start with karakia. Tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho. Tuia ki te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, homie, hui taiki. Thank you, everybody. So we're live streaming on the YouTube channel, and I've got some apologies from Councillor Lloyd McCall, and apologies from Councillor Kevin Malcolm for lateness. Can I have somebody moving?
Michael for lateness as well.
Oh, and
okay,
and Michael for lateness. So welcome to those on Zoom, and Councillor Laws for lateness as well. He's trying to get into Zoom, and Councillor Wheel, welcome. Okay, can I have a movement, a second for the apologies, please? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Somerville, thank you very much. Okay, public forum. We do have public forum today. We have Giselle Laven. Would you like to come up here and address us? Who's going to address us around Super Bowl?
I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I did bring the schedule to show people the buses I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you come up to the end of the table.
Yeah.
Evidence. Added to that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Just need to press that button and you can get this.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Right in.
Yeah.
Welcome, Giselle. So you've got 5 minutes to address us, and please leave some time for questions if you can.
Thank you. My name is Giselle Lavin. I live in Waitati. I'm retired and a gold card holder, and I don't drive. So I'm dependent on the #1 Palmerston bus. In the past, before the hub was built, I would go into town once or twice a week and catch the 11:40 bus from Waitati that arrived in town at 12 noon, have lunch, do some shopping at New World, and catch the bus from New World Centre City at 3, like between 2:45 and 3. It would be sitting there. In fact, it sat there till 3:15, so that any seniors with gold cards could be within the time, could board before 3 o'clock. So be able to use their card to return. So you could have a couple of hours in town without paying bus fares, which most people in town can do anyway. I would catch the bus between 2:45 and 3 using my gold card, which enabled me to have the cheaper rate. So I was able to access the gold card fare, to come home with. The only other bus leaving town is at 6 p.m. So if I got stuck, I would catch the 6 p.m. and but of course you couldn't use a gold card on that one. So there was only once a day. Once the bus hub opened, there was a notice in the POWA, POA newspaper, the Waikouaiti regular newspaper, stating that although it was no longer possible to board the bus at New World because it would be leaving from the hub at 3:45, if you showed your gold card on the return on the 3:45 bus to the driver, you would not be charged and you would not have to pay anyway. So this article was in the POA newspaper, and I thought, great, it's good that they're considering us and giving us the same advantages to use the card between 9 and 3 that people get in town. So yeah, I could show the gold card and have done for several years, just flash my gold card and got on the bus at 3:45 when I've done that. Up until a few weeks ago, when the driver told me in front of a bus full of school children that he would not accept it and that I would have to use my bus B card and pay the fare. It's not so much about the money, but the principle. If you're going to make changes of that nature, it should be advertised. You took the trouble to advertise it in our local paper when the hub opened. If this is no longer the case and we can no longer use our gold card on the 3:35 bus, then we should be informed. We shouldn't be told off by a driver. I have, of course, since this incident a couple of weeks ago, been paying fare, but return fare. But I would have appreciated that the seniors were notified of these changes and at least have it published in the local paper the way you did when you allowed us to have that thing. There's other things that annoy me about the bus. We finally got a weekend. We've got weekend buses, and frankly, I suppose it's a good thing, although it hasn't really done much for me because almost everything I go to, the art openings, the lectures at the uni, the museum functions are on a Friday night, and only on the Saturday night do we have the late night buses. So I guess it's fun for people that like to party, but not for me anyway. So I've only used them once when I missed a 6 o'clock bus home. I thought maybe I could use, when you first started the weekend, a late night bus on the Saturday night, I thought I might be able to use it to visit some of my friends for tea that live in Waikouaiti. I live in Waitati, which is actually quite close, but anyway. So I caught the 6:25 or something bus from Waitati to Waikouaiti and got off there shortly afterwards. And then, so I said to the driver I was getting off, I'm assuming I can catch a bus in an hour or so to go home because you have to be back in town at 9 o'clock for the 9 o'clock leaving bus, don't you? And he said, oh no, that's a dead bus. We'll take you home from town if you're going, but we will not take you home from Waikouaiti. I'd never heard of a dead bus, but he said, no, I don't stop. Anyway, it was a nuisance and I had to get people to pick me up. But yeah, apparently, what is this dead bus business? It's not something I've heard of before, but I guess, so if you want to visit friends and make use of that Saturday night and go the opposite direction, it doesn't work. You can only go home on it or else, yeah, they won't stop.
Thanks, Giselle. Are you able to wrap up?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll wrap up. There's other things that frustrate me a little bit about that service. I don't think it's coordinated with the other buses in town. If you're going on to other places, the bus timetables just don't work on the weekend. But anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for that. Have you got any queries of Giselle? Councillor Murphy?
So, when you had to pay for the bus,
Yeah.
what do you think of the bus fare? Was it reasonable?
Oh, the bus fare is great. I mean, I'm not complaining about that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm just frustrated that I wasn't notified that there'd been a change made. Yeah,
Well, thanks for your
Yeah.
presentation.
yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Wilson?
Sorry, just on that point of clarification, when that happened, was the bus fare higher than it is now or the same? When we started opening the bus up, was that when the fare was $8 or $9? Or
Oh, no, it was never for me, $8 or $9. With a gold card, it was $4. Yes, but prior to that, there was a zoning system,
yeah,
prior to the hub, which was totally different. And the fare, not to Waitangi, but out to Palmerston, I think was 8 or 9, I don't know.
Mm.
That would have been what zone it was.
okay, no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I think we were zone 3 at that time, if
Okay.
you remember the zoning system. Yeah. Mm.
I think we've reached the end of questions. Thank you very much for coming in. We don't know about these things if people don't tell us, so that's really helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on now to confirmation of the agenda. What have we got? So we've got 2 items to note and 2 items to, my computer's decided to note, and 2 items where staff are seeking direction. So we'll get on with that. Will somebody confirm the agenda for us? Thank you, Councillor Noon and Councillor Wilson. And we've got declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision-making when a conflict arises between their role as an elected representative and any private or external interests they might have. The register of pecuniary interests can be found on the OMC website. Does anyone have any conflicts they wish to declare? That's good, thank you. We were to have a presentation, but that has been cancelled, so we won't have that. Confirmation of the minutes. Has everybody read through, and can people move a confirmation? Who will second that for me? Councillor Weir, thank you. And action register, we've got no current actions. So I'll move into matters of consideration. Welcome Lorraine, welcome Anita. Good to see you today. And we've got a bit going on. It seems that the transport operating environment is a moving feast. Network performance growth still seems to be going up everywhere except on the ferry. Revenue falling, mostly I think because of the funded child fares, which will be discussed later today, I should think. The negative feedback's gone down, things look pretty good that way. And then, of course, the regional public transport plan is a big item that's up for discussion and being prepared under quite a different GPS land transport than we've had in the past. So welcome you two, and what would you like to introduce your papers, please?
Thank you. Yes, we've been rather busy. I think I mentioned to a couple of you when we put the paper to February Council that you went away on holiday, rightly so, deserved, and then come back and it's like we've turned the world around in the transport operating environment. So things moved quickly, but we have covered a lot of ground as well. And one of the things I'm quite excited to update you about is in terms of the item in the transport operating report on the temporary disablement of bike racks. We've actually moved really quickly with our operators to find out to find a pathway forward for our triple racks in Queenstown with Ritchie's, and we will be able to progress that. It won't happen overnight because we've got the solution. We've agreed the funding, and but we still have to obviously install the solution for all the buses there, double and triple, and then they have to apply for their exemption, which can take up to a month. But we will be moving quite quickly there, and we're making significant progress in Dunedin, which arguably should have been the easier one because they're all double racks, but of course it's a larger fleet and we have 2 operators and they're moving at slightly different rates, and Ritchie's, who operate in Queenstown, made Queenstown a priority, especially because we had to resolve the triple rack issue amongst ourselves and with Canterbury, not at the national level. Just to note briefly, the emissions reduction plan, I think the thing to say there is it's just significantly different to when the first reduction plan came out, and then the impact that had on transport activities and investment. It flowed through the GPS. This one came out after the GPS, and the GPS has removed, I guess, the addressing emissions through transport in terms of the way that we invest, so hasn't had the same impact. There is the 44 million roughly from boat transport to support the introduction of zero emission buses over multiple years, but 44 million across the country and across the size of our fleets is just not a lot. And I think in a NZ Inc. perspective, across the PTAs, we'd probably rather see it directed towards some of the smaller PTAs, the Tairapatis and the Taranakis and the Northlands, who struggle to provide the services anyway, due to the size of their population and the operating costs. Just to note that we now have the Honourable Chris Bishop as our Minister for Transport. He describes himself as an urbanist, and he's also Minister for Housing. So we're hoping that some of the integration between transport investments, especially where they provide for housing development, in Queenstown obviously, will perhaps have a different recognition than the previous minister, but there's been no word on that yet. Just note the GTFS update. This is something we do roughly annually for tidy ups on the network, and then also for July to update our timetables to recognise the new investments with the contracting of Unit 5, and which significantly we removed C80 and 81 circular routes and 65 for the on-demand, and some other activities that occurred during the year, like the afternoon City to Warrington service that was introduced, and of course the Queenstown early business case works. And then just to bring you up to date, or I guess provide more information, that we continue to have regular discussions with Ministry of Education on the withdrawal of school services. It's sort of always an issue, but it becomes prominent at this time of the year when all the schools are back, and there'll be a new cohort that may or may not have the same services that were provided the previous year, which is the case in Sandeman and Dunedin. We have some issues with capacity, but we're also experiencing issues in Queenstown because what should be a regular 15-minute service on the Route 1, for instance, can get delayed significantly by the roadworks, the opening of the arterial and around the centre of town. And so if children don't get on a bus, or if they miss a bus just slightly, they may have a longer wait than is desirable. We're limited in our ability to run a banker bus on what is a 15-minute frequency, but due to just the availability of buses and drivers in Queenstown, and at this stage, the funding that we've got through the new services will be addressing the Jacks Point, Whale Rise and Fern Hill and Arrowtown services. Any questions? Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. That's it's just a moving feast, isn't it? There's all sorts of stuff going on everywhere. So we've got questions from Councillor Callagher, Noon, where?
Thanks. When you've got more capacity than the bus can carry, who gets priority? First on.
So when we were able to, most of the contracts require that an extra bus is sent out, so that it is first on, first served. So by the time it gets to a stop where it's reached bus full, we would try and run what we call a banker bus. We're limited in our ability to do that in Queenstown just because of the size of the fleet and the number of drivers.
So with the start of the season, is it a first day learning curve as to the numbers that are likely to be waiting at the stops? And if it's like with the issue with school children, then if you had, you've got a number there, school children, elderly, whatever, how do you, is it up to the driver to allow one, allow off, who gets priority in those? And then is there somebody who then says we need another bus urgently because we've got another 50 to collect?
Yes, I don't think that the drivers tend to prioritise. It's like if you're at the start of the run and then you'll get on, you're right at the start, you'll get a seat. At some point, you'll reach standing capacity, and then the draft drivers will just keep picking up until they reach their maximum carrying capacity. At some point along there, if they're already expecting people to come, they and they anticipate that they're going to be over full, then they will run back to the depot. When I mentioned the Route 1, if it's a 15-minute frequency, we don't have many of them, Route 8 and Dunedin and 63, I think, a few others. We wouldn't probably send out a bank bus. If it's 30 minutes or hourly, then that's when we would try and do it. But even in Queenstown, we're restricted. It is a learning curve. We don't know the numbers for the new cohort, but we also know that travel patterns change by about April, and certainly in the second term when before and after school activities happen. Also, there's more sickness. So other users aren't on the network. So we do our best to anticipate, but it is a learning curve.
Right. And if you are there waiting and you can't get on the bus because there's too many available, you've got to wait. You pay the same, even though you've had to wait for the second bus as you would do for the first bus.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some real problems there. I think, Lorraine, there's some big issues. You can't put more buses on, for example, the Sunshine Bay route. It's a 15-minute route already. It's being filled up with, I'm just carrying on from, I'll come to you shortly, Councillor Newman, carrying on from this discussion. The buses have real trouble getting through town at that time of day. There's a lot of congestion all the way down the route, and there's kids that aren't actually getting there. We know that this isn't specifically our problem. It's perhaps, but MO, the Ministry of Education have backed away from that issue, leaving it in the parents' hands. So my question is, are things going to get easier for those learners or those students trying to get through town in time to get to high school, which is the other side of town?
To the extent that we can, we we have planned for future demand, and that will deliver through the business case for Queenstown, and we do that. We have good capacity on most of our routes in Dunedin, but unfortunately it's a first day learning, and it's almost always retrospective, and we are, as you'll see in the actually it's not in the network performance report, but Julian will probably update you, we are carrying highest numbers ever on the network and over the last few weeks, day trips, and so we respond, but it's an issue across the country.
So we're reactive,
and it's not just
rather
for
than proactive.
PT, it's the whole network will be, everybody's moving at the moment back to school, back to work, and not sick.
Yeah, I think I would just say that the team has done as much as they can to optimise that network, but within funding constraints and resource constraints, there's nothing else that we can realistically do, and so it does almost require people to fall off the PT system and get onto the road, which just compounds the issue even further.
Thank you. Wider issue. Councillor Noon, then Weir, then Wilson.
I'll just seek a bit of liberty here, but councillor Kelleher sought a definition of a banker bus. So I just wonder whether I could seek a definition of a D bus. That's my first question.
I think the reference was to when a bus has is kind of run its last route of the day, and it's at like a destination, and then that bus returns back to the depot or where it's being stabled. It's not carrying passengers. It's not a scheduled route, but it might be running exactly the route back to the depot.
And could it also be that the bus driver lives at the end of that route as well? Is that a possibility that it could be a dead bus as well?
That's right, yeah. Where it's being stabled might be the drivers.
My question with regards to bike racks, and it's good that things are moving quite quickly, by the sound of it. NPA made some comment that it was funding available, however, it was within the existing package. So what does that mean for your government priorities? Has there something been bumped down on this because you made the comment around that we're committed to helping with the financial resource to the solution, and I just wondered if there's any impact on our priorities.
At this stage, no. It's all doable within the funding envelope. It's just, I guess, some of those larger fleets in Auckland and Wellington may have some bigger issues.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Weir, I'd like to welcome Councillor Laws online. Thank you for being here. And Councillor Weir now.
Just sort of following up on Andrew's questions and sort of asking you to crystal ball gaze a little bit, sorry, but do we have sort of an indication? I know you said it takes a month from when you send that application into NZTA, or up to a month from there. Do we have any sort of indication of how far away we are from that point for any of our buses? And then I guess as a follow-up to that, do you think at this point any governance response would potentially speed that up, or are we at the point where we just need to get them away?
So I can't really comment. My best guess would be a couple of weeks. We don't make the application, the operator does, and it can take up to a month, may not take up a month. I don't think that there's anything that can be brought to bear on that's just processed at that stage.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Tell me if I've got the wrong report to ask this question. When the lines are congested or the roads are congested, especially in Queenstown, what I've seen and reflect on is the difficulty of buses, which should be a priority route, getting in back into the traffic flow once they've pulled it over as well, and it can delay substantially. Now, we've raised it around the table, but I don't know that we've ever acted. I'm just wondering, is this the time or appropriate place to be moving, that we not only note in the report, but suggest that we should be writing to the Minister and the Ministry for consideration for public transport to be given a priority at coming out of stores?
So this is the report. So paragraph 31 talks about councillor suggested there may be some matters that are helpfully raised with the Minister of Transport, including the different treatment of super gold card holders compared to children, and the ability to prioritise bus movements on the roading network. So that is the avenue for discussion, and if you wanted to add a resolution, we could action that.
In some ways, I want to do the super cold after the discussion on 9.4, but because that's where the conflict is there to a high extent. But I'd certainly be very happy to move, and I'm very happy to have some wordsmithing on this, that we write. Is it the Ministry or the Minister? It's a hard one because I never quite understand the roles of the Ministry. Sure.
We would probably recommend the Minister.
Yes, write to the Minister and saying that for the efficiency and effectiveness of the government funded, substantially government funded investment into public transport, there needs to be a change in the law prioritising buses coming into, the. If they're indicating, they should be given way to. And that actually needs a rural water law and potentially a fine with it. So the motion I'm here to put is when it suits later, something along that line.
Would you like to
Yeah.
work on that?
Yeah, I'll
and
work on
come
that.
back to us
Yeah.
on it? Any further questions on the operating environment? Councillor Somerville, thank you.
Thank you. Look, I just had one small matter in paragraph 19. It describes some changes to the Dunedin routes coming in South Dunedin. I was just wondering, could you remind us the reasons for those changes? We've probably heard it before.
So the reason is, I guess, to the fundamental kind of principle for the network is that where you can get as many routes converging, especially when you get to the centre, that it vastly increases the frequency for anyone sort of from South Dunedin coming in, and direct route frequency obviously attracts users, and it also helps, I guess, what we call the legibility, so people understanding that where the bus goes. If I get on this bus, am I going to go this route or that route? And the alignment is chosen because it's actually better operating conditions traffic-wise, and also better serviceability for people where people actually want to get on and get off on those other sides of some of those big box retails on Main Street, and then the Oval is just not, we don't get the onboardings and boarding.
Thanks. So it sounds like a better service for bus users, and I'm sure that will be well communicated ahead of time. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine and Anita. The report is really understandable and it's looking really good. Thank you very much. It's great to see you keep a really good eye on the operating environment because it's definitely changing quickly. So I'll put that report. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilson, second that, and all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, or something. That's great. Thank you very much.
And you seconded motion?
Do you want to bring that motion now, or do you want to?
I
work
think
on
it comes
that?
under that paper. Oh, it comes
Okay.
here, sorry.
All right.
What I've got, and it may be in two parts, but I'm happy to have some feedback on it, is that council write to the minister seeking changes to legislation to give public transport priority on the roading network to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the substantive government investment. I also think that we probably should be letting local government New Zealand know, maybe arena that you consider, but that's different. It's different, and that may be an action we do subsequently.
Okay.
For the conference.
Have you got a seconder for that? Yes, councillor Noon will second it.
That we can go.
Okay, we don't need to get this, can you fire that?
Yes, I'm just typing
to
it up.
governance?
Yes, sorry, I'm just typing it up. If you want to hold that paper and.
Okay, can we do that?
Yeah.
No,
Let's just get it
Yeah.
closed out, so we could take a 5-minute adjournment, okay,
Mm.
finishes that, and then come back.
okay, we'll take a 5 minutes adjournment.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Should have got it.
That's coming from some, I don't know, maybe the regional land transport committees.
Thank you. I think we've got that sorted, so the adjournment's over. We're back in the meeting. And we're about to put Kate's motion.
So the motion that's been moved by Kate, just for clarity, we aren't sharing it at the moment, that the Public and Active Transport Committee recommends that council write to the Minister of Transport seeking changes to legislation to give public transport priority on the roading network to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of substantial government investment.
So specifically.
Oh, look, she's got it up there. Well done, thanks. Carol.
It's more that's all right.
Okay, so that's on the screen now. Would you like to speak to that?
Wait, have you got a second?
You've got a second, it was Councillor Neil, was it?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't just say
No, that's all good.
Look, it's interesting discussion we've had. Look, this could have come from a number of sources, but the fact is we need to start putting this idea up to the minister in time that we can understand this response and garner potential support both from the regional land transport committees, but also at local government New Zealand. This is one thing that would make public transport work better. And if it doesn't work well, then we just get congestion, as we've just heard in thank you for those examples. So just it just needs a simple change.
Councillor No.
Just backing up what Kate has said, if like most of the passenger transport buses do have signage on the back to say, give way when the bus is leaving a bus stop or whatever, or words to that and similar to that, to actually have some sort of regulatory mechanism to actually make that work seems to make a lot of sense to me, because it creates efficiency right across the network. The buses are able to flow better.
Go open for some discussion. Councillor Weir.
I actually have a question, probably of Richard, just around, because it's the recommendation to council, is there time before the next council meeting for us to alert neighbouring PTAs or anything and socialise this?
So we would socialise this anyway, just through the networks, through the transport network. It's just the way that we operate. If we're doing something, we would share it with those who may have interest in it, and they would back it up or not. So that would happen anyway.
You'll be able to feed in any red flags they raise or anything. That was, yeah, cool.
Welcome, Councillor Malcolm. Any further questions on this?
Yep.
Sorry, Councillor Somerville, then Councillor Kelleher.
Right, I was going to contribute to the discussion. Look, this sounds like a very promising idea to me. I guess I'm just concerned because of around our decision-making processes. And a promising idea without fuller consideration may in fact have other implications that we haven't thought of. As well as that, it seems to me there could be potential for this to come from a wider group than just the Otago Regional Council. So my preference would be, yes, let's investigate this idea, but I don't think we're quite ready to write to the minister until we have considered all the implications further.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, anybody? No? Okay, let's do that. Okay, it's in debate. Councillor Kelleher.
Yeah, I have a question too. You're accepting questions in debate?
Yeah, I did. So yes, please go ahead.
Excellent. When we say we're writing to the minister, we're seeking changes to legislation to give priority, to what extent is the priority that we're looking for? Well, we're asking for a very broad request that do we then hand it on to the minister and the ministry to come up with the changes? Or wouldn't we be better to clarify the changes we would like and then write to the minister?
Do we get to do any answers now, or is that something? Yeah, okay. I'm wondering, Councillor Wilson, do we have a specific, do you specifically know what you mean? Is this specifically about buses being able to pull out from bus stops?
It is mainly addressing that. There will be some other minor exceptions to that, but it is just saying, as you would for a police car or anything else, I'm sure they're probably regulated, maybe they're not. But given them the requirement that you give them space to move out in Bergen actually. I'm happy. I just don't want the staff to have to write another report because I think that would be, we've heard this, we've discussed it around the table. I appreciate all the points made. It requires, because I think having consensus is really important, a change to the motion that recommends that staff advise what the letter might look like. I'm happy with that as well, but I just don't think it's requiring a report.
Councillor Murphy?
Look, I won't be supporting this motion because I really don't think we should be doing motions on the hoof. And I'm also a little bit surprised that we are suggesting regulation here as opposed to taking the community with us through communication. So, that's it.
Any further discussion? I wonder if a way forward is, Councillor Wilson, might be to adjust that to be recommending a process to seek changes. Would that be, rather than writing directly to the minister at this point?
I'm actually at the point where we've talked about this so often that I'm disappointed that we can't do it. I'd rather, what I'm saying is then I can look at alternatives otherwise. I think it's the easiest, quickest way to do it.
Okay, let's put the motion in.
So I just do, right,
Yes,
right. Sorry, this is an issue that has been discussed and we've finally been given a paragraph in the report, thank you, to consider a way forward. I love the fact that there are really good courteous drivers that do this, and I love the fact that the bus drivers engage with that with their happy go flashing lights and saying thank you. It is wonderful. The non-regulatory space is well used. It is in Queenstown, however, and I've experienced myself and seen it various times, that because people are in congestion, it doesn't work effectively. And it can delay substantially the effectiveness of the service. It is adding to the problem. If we can't get priority lanes in there, which we can't because the road network is so difficult and they're so expensive, the simplest thing that we can do is say that an indicator on a bus means that you give way to them and let that bus in. It's just that simple. And without a regulatory framework around it, it just isn't happening to some people. It just requires a rule. Some people are that unaware of the situation. So I'm just putting it out there that that's probably the most functional way of getting better. And I've got enough experience in this. I've heard about it at every other level. No one is actually proposing it, and let's just start proposing it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We'll put the motion, or did you want to say anything? No. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Somerville against. Do you want that noted? No.
Councillor Witham.
Oh, sorry. And Somerville against. Okay. That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we'll now we need to note the whole report.
I've done that.
That's done. Okay, good. So we'll move on to 9.2, which is a 6-month network performance report. And Julian's coming out. Julian Phillips, welcome. And there's a lot of good news in this report again, with the patronage up, except for the ferries. Although finances are somewhat down, but there's good reason for that too. Kia ora, Julian, welcome. And who have you got? Laura. Welcome, Laura. Laura, hello. And would you introduce the paper, please?
Yeah, so I've just done a brief summary as usual, if you're happy with me to go through that. And Laura's with us if there are any questions related to total mobility. So in brief, this half-year report continues the previous year's strong performance. Dunedin patronage is up 4%, Queenstown 5%, total mobility 18%. It's important to note that this growth is building on extremely strong patronage growth from the previous financial year, where we had full year increases of 21% and 51% for Dunedin and Queenstown respectively. Still difficult to predict how the rest of the year will go at this stage. At the previous POTC, I think I said that it's possible this growth will level out or plateau as we progress through the year. However, that being said, for Dunedin, 4 of the 6 months of the half year reporting period were record patronage highs. On Tuesday and Wednesday last week, in our preliminary data, Dunedin had its 2 highest days of patronage ever, each day exceeding 15,000 trips per day. And meanwhile, in Queenstown, despite, as we've discussed, some hugely complex and ongoing works affecting both our interchanges and the roundabout area near our office, in Queenstown, every month since June 2023 has been at record levels of patronage, which is something like 19 months of sustained record growth. And we hope, Lorraine and Anita touched on the stage 1 of the business case coming in later on this year, which will encourage greater patronage later on in the year. Total mobility growth is substantive. Just noting that we've also had a massive growth in our customer base with well over 100% more registered clients than this point 4 years ago. So we have over 8,500 clients versus a little over 3,500 4 years ago. In terms of reliability on the network, 99.6% of our services have been operated. Ferry service patronage remains lower with a 12% drop compared to the same quarter last year. There has been a downward pattern of patronage on the ferry service, but the rate of decline is flattening. And you may have noted on the graph that it's actually pointing towards a recovery with the last couple of months in the half year period. November patronage exceeded the previous year, and December was pretty close to that. With passenger feedback, we've recorded a little over 1,600 points of feedback, representing about 0.7% of the number of trips operated, of which half or 0.35% were complaints. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I've got one to kick us off, and thank you for the report. It's really good, but there's obviously going to be some pressures coming from this growth, and it looks to me that there's a lot of pressure coming on total mobility. How are we coping with that pressure in the funding?
I'm just going to take that question. We're actually going to bring a paper to you this month at council because as Julian's emphasised, we've got a far bigger demand for service. So Laura's doing a sterling job, but we are running out of money. So we do need to come and get a decision from you about how we managed the last few months of the financial year.
Thank you. Look at Councillor Wilson. Questions? Go, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Look, I've read the report and it's amazing the numbers. Well done to the community. You're doing a fabulous job, and that's because the service is there to use. Great. But there's a disconnect with the revenue. And I know that the assumption is, but I'm just going to tease it out because the numbers didn't look right to me, but I think I'm missing something. Mm-hmm. So the use is up, but the income is down. And I know that we've got the concessions, but that the concession frame is, like, the percentage in the concession area is relatively small. Can I understand why the revenue, how that's been, or the assumption that it's the concession?
Well, first, there's nothing else material that's changed that would affect revenue. Dunedin, there's actually quite a nice match-up. I believe the patronage drop is 4%. Sorry, the revenue drop is 8%, and the portion of child fares that 5 to 12 that are free is also 8%. It would be nice if it's exactly the same for Queenstown, however, the figures are slightly different. But Queenstown has less of a fare revenue drop, has 4% drop in revenue, so 8%. And in Queenstown, 83% of patronage is adults, whereas in Dunedin it's 50%. So 83% of people in Queenstown are paying a full fare, $2 fare, and although it's not in the report, the cash proportion of fares that are cash, which is a higher fare in Queenstown, also affects things. So there are some, I think there is a connection between the sort of 6 to 12-year-old free fares and the revenue drop.
Okay. Yeah, and can we, so, yeah. I'll come back to that, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Wilson. Councillor Malcolm.
Oh, you probably, subsequent to that is, so you're saying that 8% of 5 to 12-year-olds reflects the 8% drop in fare revenue, which wasn't in the report, but that's what you were working on. But does it, is there any sense that because we are now pushing more school children onto those buses that historically haven't been on the buses, that in fact other fare paying people are now deciding to go back to their cars?
I don't have any sort of analysis or reading anything anecdotal to support that. I mean, I suppose it's a possibility, but I think the growth, I'm not happy at the next meeting to present if council wants some specific analysis on where the growth is, but I don't think the growth is isolated to children using the bus. So what we do report on is that the percentage of children, including youth, and that hasn't significantly changed between the last report we did and now. So I think there'll be some growth, but I don't think it's pushing adults specifically off the bus. We will have challenges, as was mentioned in the previous debate, where bus services are just generally getting exceptionally full, and it's not possible to set up a backup bus. Then children or adults, anyone may decide to get a car or wait for the next bus or take an alternative method to travel.
Yeah. So when I scan on, so when I scanned in Wellington the other day, and thanks for your assistance there, Councillor Meffin putting me on a bus, which is
Got him on the public
good, got me on a bus, which is really good. So I just did that with my Visa card, so they had no idea how young I was. Some people would say how old I was, but how young I was. So on ours, because I'm really interested in that correlation to make sure that the initiatives that we are doing, and I'm sure they are, that we are in fact with all these school-age children coming on, that we aren't pushing out the other end. And is that possible to tell that?
Look, yeah, it's probably possible. But it's kind of, there's sort of a rolling sort of attrition at one end and growth at the other with students, because they get to the final year and then leave, but then there's another cohort broadly the same size starting at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, but I'm probably more interested in if we had 100 adults on the bus before this came in, have we still got that 100?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So the school cohort will change from year to year.
Yeah.
And that's just what will happen. But I'm just more interested that we are still maintaining and growing the adult part, because that would be that reflects to the cars on the road, I suppose.
So I think through the chair, I think what Julian said earlier is we don't think the proportions have changed, but we can have a closer look at that and report that in the next. So as you'll see in Dunedin, half of our people are adult. So we'll just have a look at that pattern over time.
I mean, that just reinforces that you're actually, the job we're trying to do is actually working as well. And if it's not, we need to look at some of that stuff.
So we'll just note to include an additional figure around how those proportionalities are.
That's awesome. Yeah, good work. Thanks, Jeff. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Meffin, then Wilson, then Callaghan.
This is good information, so it's well put together. Just looking at note 8 with the graphs, Dunedin concession types, and it shows the Super Gold as a 13% of usage. First question, do you know what dollar value that represents? Because I'll take it, it's all free travel. What would it cost us? Or what is the revenue that we have foregone by that?
As far as I'm aware, the revenue isn't foregone because of the support from the NZTA for that travel.
To be received.
And would you have any kind of estimate of what that revenue would be?
Assuming basically 30, at this point in time, 30% of 2.075 million.
30% of two.
Yeah, Winston's paying us that money, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think just that Super Gold category includes Super Gold members travelling on peak and paying, and then Super Gold travellers travelling off peak that would get the full subsidy for. So there's two different income sources there. One is the passenger paying on peak, the other is NZTA subsidising the travel.
So as a Super Gold user, you go onto the bus, do you? And you just swipe your card, is that how it works, or
Yeah.
how do you get there?
So the when you set up the B card, your concession is effectively linked directly onto the B card, so you don't have to show your Super Gold card. You just tap your B card and it recognises that it's you're a Super Gold customer, and it just, if you're in the 3 hours of operation, you travel for free.
And if you don't have a B card, you can still flash your Super Gold, is that how it works?
There's some driver discretion. Well, generally no, we want people to register their card to reflect that it's that they're a Super Gold user, in the same way that any concession child or something else would be.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Wilson, and then Callagher.
You've spent a long time getting really good reports to us and changing them. Just wondering about consistency, because I think telling the story when it comes to public share, it's going to be really important to be able to say if we differentiate or distinguish ourselves from other areas. Is there any consistency in the way this is all now reported, whether it be Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, or Tauranga?
Look, there are the high level. So we do look at the reports that other regions done, and some of our staff are from transport departments in other regions. So we've looked at what the stuff they've put together. Particularly we looked at Waikato, Auckland, ECAN, Bay of Plenty. So there's a lot of stuff that's similar. High level things, patronage, revenue, total mobility, and so on. Similarities in the way we report things. The way this report is 60% the same as it was sort of 3 or 4 years ago, but it's been driven by people around the table have asked for, and we've just modified it slightly each time.
It's probably a question for next time. I'm just really interested to see if our demographic on the buses are different or similar to the demographics in other centres, and if there's anything that stands out as distinguishing us. Look, we've got an older population, so it may be Super Gold, and we've got a Ministry of Education that seems to be, especially in Queensland, wanting to get out of that business. So, and that may be different because we don't see that clip. That's free buses for them out of the government package until they decide to cancel those fares, isn't it? Those services, sorry. Ministry of Education provides those buses for free.
Yeah.
Yes. And then when they withdraw them, they have to be paid for. They have to go into a paying system.
So if someone using a Ministry of Education bus, they withdraw that service and they need to use public transport, then they'll need to pay the child fare on the bus.
Or we have to account for it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Callagher, then some of them.
Sorry, thank you. I must be missing something because we're saying that it's not children, but then at point 11, we're saying the primary reason for drop in revenue is free fares for 5 to 12-year-olds. The revenue drops are way more substantial than the patronage increases, which are relatively minor other than the unit 3, which is at 10%. What am I missing? Is it just that this council needs to reconsider the free fares in the 5 to 12-year-old category? And I note that staff are considering more detail to come back to us. When will we have that?
So there's been a fares discussion last week or recently with the private share paper. There's also some discussion in the regional public transport plan in terms of application of concessions. So they're the two avenues basically for having those discussions.
Second part of that question, Gary, is I don't have the time frame, but Anita, Julie, and perhaps Lorraine will have it. we've had a couple of committee meetings now where the same issues arisen in terms of the increased patronage, decreased revenue, and we know that there was an issue when the government subsidies for youth were brought in, and we made some changes, but the numbers still, I don't know, they just don't quite look right. And that paragraph in there is because that's been picked up, and we've said we need to do a deeper dive into the reasons why this is happening, and it'll take a little bit of time to unpick that. So in terms of timing, I'd have to defer to Anita as to whether that'll be the next PATC committee or alternative, but I think it's a piece of work we need to do to get to the bottom of exactly what's caused that difference, because the common sense thing doesn't quite work, and we know we've got good data and we can have a look into it. It takes some time and it'll take some resource, but it's quite important for us to get a really good understanding of what's happening, particularly as we start to consider fare changes through the regional public transport plan.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville.
Thanks. Just turning to total mobility for a moment, is there any sign of a total mobility provider turning up in the central Otago?
Yeah, so I'm in conversations at the moment, looking at potential onboardings in the central area. They just take a while, making sure that like health and safety and everything meets our contractual requirements.
Thank you. That's great to hear, because I'm aware there has been a real gap for total mobility in the central. So let's hope that moves along well. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions? Oh, Councillor Weir.
Yeah, just I was wondering if there was any reasons on the total mobility increase, because it was quite a high increase in patronage that was different to the increases we saw across the network generally.
Yeah, so there's a few reasons why total mobility, like card holders, has gone up. We've got aging populations. The 75% subsidy is really where we see the increase start to happen, and people are just using the service more. And we have like now Balclutha is also, so like as we spread it, more people jump on. But I would say aging population is also a massive driver, and other funding pools available from other agencies are reducing. So people who historically would have saw other funding pools are now turning to total mobility.
There are also places that didn't have total mobility that now do. Is that correct? Yeah, right. And then just on that record patronage we've been having for the last few months, March Madness is a thing, and so are we expecting record patronage for March? Are we prepared, I guess, is my question.
About bus patronage. Yeah. For March, not sure yet. For February, at least one of the regions that I've confirmed with finance figures won't be at record levels, but they're there or thereabouts. So I think the curve will start to flatten a little bit, but we'll see when we've got all the data collected by the time of the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Okay, so our recommendation is to note the summary of public transport activity in Otago for Q1. I have a mover, Kate Wilson, seconder, Councillor Noon, and put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? No, awesome. So we'll move on to 9.3, updates on the regional public transport plan. So we've got the draft regional public transport plan, and we recommend that it's sent to council to approve consultation. That's what we're doing here. And they're also seeking direction from the committee on the composition of the hearings panel, which will be brought to the March 19 council meeting. Would you like to welcome? How are you? Nice to see you. And can we, would you like to present this report? Do you have anything to say?
So tēnā koutou katoa. So we're really pleased to bring to you our draft regional public transport plan. As you can see, there's been quite a significant amount of work put into it since we circulated the early draft in October last year. The document has evolved to reflect and mainly incorporate the feedback from our early stakeholder engagement with the communities, as well as our TAs and NZTA, whom we've worked really closely throughout the drafting of this document. And also that you'll see that it now reflects the updated ministerial expectations and changes in policy with respect to private share and value for money. Just a reminder that this document functions as a statutory document that must comply with the LTMA and the NZTA guidance, as well as being our vehicle for sharing our vision for public transport with our communities for the next 10 years. Balancing these multiple functions and audiences is not always easy, but to date, the feedback, especially from our partners for this project, has been super positive. And just to let you know, we're in the process of finalising the document with our comms team, and we'll incorporate any amendments that you'd like to see in that version before we bring it to council on the 19th of March for approval to consult. Just the other part of our paper is around the hearings panel, and so it would be good to have a discussion today on what the composition of that panel looks like, to hear our RPTP submissions. We had a question prior to the meeting just around the composition of our last.
Sorry, just to interrupt. So yeah, it's stopped now. We just had a duress alarm, but so we'll just keep going with the meeting until we're advised otherwise. Thanks, Robin.
Sorry, no worries. So yeah, we had a question prior to the meeting on what the composition of our RPTP's hearing panel was last time. So last time we had a councillor from Dunedin as well as one from Queenstown, and we also had an independent advisor. However, we just wanted to note that the previous RPTP was written in an environment where there was a very fixed network, and it was also quite a contentious environment with pressure from both DCC and QIDC to have public transport delegated. We feel this time that this RPTP is a little bit different. We're focusing on our connectivity and the wider regional activities. Our public transport network is also in good space, and we want to continue to build on this. However, we do acknowledge that we're working in a fiscally constrained environment, so tempering our ambition has to also be considered. So our recommendation is for a full hearing panel made up of regional councils. We think it's appropriate at this time, and would support either 3 or also 5 councillors to allow that wider representation across the wards. And also we have a high level of expertise in our transport team now, and we're here to support the panel to provide that technical information as required.
Thanks, Robin. It's a great report, and we're definitely in a very different environment, and it's really interesting, but I think we've come a long way since we last did this plan, so it's awesome. Thank you for that. So questions now.
Sorry, just going to make a suggestion in terms of just to keep this part clear, maybe the questions first on the document, the substantive document, and then I know there'll obviously be some discussion about the panel piece as well. So I just think if we do those 2 conversations separately, it'll just help the flow of it. So maybe if we start with the substantive document content, and then once everyone's had their questions there, we can move on to questions about the hearings panel, and then move into motions over that.
So we'll wait for discussion until after the questions on both parts are done. Okay, so we'll start with questions on the substantive.
Well, actually, I'm just going to thank you very much for that advice, Ian. I'm just checking now that if we ask a question, does that preclude us from being on the panel with? No. Okay, I just want to check that.
Awesome. So we'll go through questions and questions first on the report. So we'll do those right now, but we won't have the discussion on the report until a bit later.
Yeah.
So questions, please.
So all bus in the branding, I'm really intrigued by this. And I understand why it's a good thing to brand, but I also know that those Richies or Go Bus or whoever may get a tender use those buses outside of this when they're serving on all bus. Is that correct? They're allowed to use those buses at alternative functions. Yeah. And that's where some confusion happens, I think.
It depends on if the arrangement is from council through I guess sponsorship.
I'm going to ask a question this way. Yeah. So if I'm Go Bus and I've got all bus on my bus, while I have to use that bus on a route, are they precluded from using that for a rugby tournament outside of those hours when it's not required on the service, or for Well, no, push shuttles may or may not be, so I'm not going to, or for other events that may compromise or have the potential to compromise our image as the Otago Regional Council.
No, they're not precluded, unfortunately, but they're strongly discouraged.
Yes. I just want to make sure, because I think there's a vulnerability there that I don't think is explored, but I just wanted to check on that. My second question is, and it's a really good report and much more readable than the previous one, so thank you. It's a lot of work, but I've noticed someone kindly left this on our table from last meeting. In here, which is in Appendix 1, I appreciate that, was one of the appendices. Our goal as a council is to, which I really like, is Otago has an integrated transport system that contributes to the accessibility and connectivity. And yet, and when I read the full, the overview and why is transport important, that connectivity, which is really critical to us, doesn't come through in the report. It does talk about emissions, it talks about equality, but it's actually that overarching thing. And I just wanted to ask, is there a reason for that? Or am I just misguided in my reading? We all have our own biases.
No, there's not a reason for that. I think we've tried to bring that through. I guess the wider regional connectivity, we are trying to be realistic in what we can achieve in the next 3 to 10 years. If we look to some of the more ambitious stuff, it sits in those maps, which is looking at that 10 years and beyond. In terms of the report itself, we do mention the region in terms of a connected and integrated network. That's our focus area for trying to bring through that connectivity piece that links to the strategy.
Where is it?
Does that answer quick? So in the report,
in the report,
on the table in paragraph 15.
Yeah, sorry, I'm actually talking about the document. So,
right. Yeah, sorry, I was just checking off both pieces. Yeah.
And I just want to give the context. There has been pushback with bus fares going up and people not understanding what we're trying to deliver. And I think, I mean, the question is, if you're looking at it as a ratepayer who really isn't interested in other people's transport problems, and don't see it as bringing customers to their shop and things, it is, those other issues may not be as high a priority as understanding that they are actually connecting them to your business. And that's, in that light, I was wondering whether we pitched it for the GPS perhaps, but we haven't pitched it necessarily to the audience of the people paying for it. If that make, and I was just wondering if that was in your mind. I appreciate you've got several masters here.
I think if that feedback comes through submissions, then we can adjust the document to reflect that. And I think it's a valid point. It's, a document that should be relevant to the audience. And if it's not quite there, then we'd make those changes.
Another one I'm thinking of that before I move on to Councillor Gallagher is, were there any serious themes that came back in your consultations with various stakeholders? And did that theme arise?
There were definitely themes that came through from our consultation. I think we've tried to reflect those as best we can within the document. The connectivity piece definitely came up a lot, particularly with our smaller TAs and feeling a little bit left out. Obviously, we've got our 2 strong networks in Dunedin and Queenstown, but what else are we trying to do to bring in that connectivity? With looking at the community transport as possibly being a lever to start those conversations. So starting in the community and potentially that would lead to something more substantial in future. But again, unfortunately, we're obviously constrained by our ability to fund those additional services. So yeah, it's that real challenge of being able to write something that's reflective of where we are, whilst also where we want to go.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Gallagher, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. The page 5 forward looks to be in a version of Latin versus Swahili. Is that Latin versus Swahili that is still to come?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Is that
Can we really
we did have
approve-
an issue with how the PDF got loaded onto Is that what we're talking about? Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, yes.
We're not asking you to approve the RPTV today, so when you get the version for council, we'll make sure that it's
Right,
in
Swahili.
English.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Councillor Somerville?
Thanks. In the draft RPTP there, under the policies, most of the policies have a set of actions, but under the safety policy, I noted there weren't any actions noted. And I thought that was a very important area. I wondered if you could explain around that.
Yeah, sure. Safety was a tricky one because we felt it sort of was through all focus areas. And so I think rather than having safety actions per se, you'll note that there are safety actions within each of the other focus areas. Rather than pulling it out on its own, it became very challenging, and we did try. So it's kind of inherent obviously in everything we do, and it crosses over through the other elements, the other focus areas of the document. So have a look through for some of the actions that speak to safety rather than specifically.
Can check that. And I guess sort of more generally, are you asking here for feedback on that document, or is that better given a different way if it's specific things? Not sure who I'm asking that of.
Yeah, so what we would really like when we bring this to you on the 19th of March is for it to be approved for consultation. So if you have feedback, now is the time to provide that so that we can see if we can adjust. So it's sort of the no surprises approach when you see it in a few weeks' time.
Okay, I had one thing that I might as well then. On page 8 of the document, or 38 of the council papers, what makes good public transport? Those aren't the things that would spring to mind, obviously, to answer that myself. It's very technical stuff about a fair labour market and efficient investment and collaboration. So whether that's altered or whether the question, and I understand where those came from, but it's not the obvious things about. Let's see what I was going to ask too, and maybe I'm not sure if this is the place, when it comes to the public consultation, what specific questions and issues were you wanting to raise there?
So at the moment, the 4 questions that we're looking at raising, sorry, I don't actually have in front of me, basically are, do you support the free children fares? Should we increase our adult B card fare? Should we sorry, hang on, give me 1 second. I'll just pull up the document and I've got it right there because we were just working on it yesterday. Sorry, 2 seconds. I have the questions here, so let me get them right. Should we increase our bus fares? Should we change our child concessions? Should passengers travelling longer distance pay higher bus fares? So that's the zonal aspect. And should we support non-profit community transport services in our smaller communities?
Great, thank you. That's a nice, clear set of questions. Right.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Just quickly on that branding thing, I was just wondering if that was sort of covering just one or the other of the sort of actual physical bus wraps and stuff like that Kate was touching on, or the sort of online ads like our bus safety campaign and just theoretical other advertisements and other campaigns in the community or online, or if it was covering that whole sort of picture.
Sorry, can you just, we're not quite clear on the actual question, sorry, Councillor. We're all sort of.
Was it covering the like physical bus infrastructure branding or the online advertisements and that kind of thing, or both?
In terms of the policy and the RPTP? Yeah, both.
Thank you, it's both, yes.
Everything.
Yeah, sorry.
Cool, thanks.
Apologies.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on now. Oh, no, Councillor Niffen.
Just a question around improving financial performance by third-party revenue. How's it at the moment? We have advertising on buses. Who gets the revenue for that? Is it the ORC or is it the bus company itself, or how do we make most of that?
So that's a good question. So we and discussed it a little bit in a private share paper recently. So at the moment, we've got a bit of a split. So our older contracts have that revenue going back to the operators. But as we're renewing contracts, we're starting to change them so that revenue comes back in-house. So that ORC can.
So we'd manage it then?
It would feed in just as, I don't think we technically manage it, but it's just an income stream.
So the operator
Oh,
would probably be the one then that would be approached for advertising. And they would arrange it and we would get the revenue for it. I mean, there's intricacies to this.
So who sells the advertising?
Yeah, so I would expect us to be more ORC to be more proactive in that space in future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on now to questions and about the second part of this, the preferred option and the composition of the hearings panel. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Happy to move.
Okay, so we'll now go back to we're going to move on to seconder. So go to mover, Kate Wilson.
Well, I'm happy to move Andrew, Alexa and.
No.
Oh,
Can I just,
No,
just
we don't
to
need to
clarify,
go.
so what we're looking for today
there's
is a
no option.
recommendation on the
Option.
on the way we move the panel forward when we bring the council paper forward with the English version of the forward for sign off. We will also then be seeking names to go against the model of hearing panel that you are voting on today. So what we're looking for is one of those options and ideally numbers as well, because then we can fit that into the paper that is coming to the future council meeting.
Apologies, it's badly read on my part. I'm happy to do the option with 3 councillors. Just one question, with it. Given the number of hearings or would it assist to have an alternate, which is something that we had to do well over COVID, but it's less demanding now. Are you confident that 2 should 1 be sick, be able to carry the load?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Thank you.
So should we take these separately? Or?
No, I think it's okay. It'd just be good to confirm that what we're now talking about is recommendation A is what receives the report, receives the regional public transport plan, recommends to council that it goes out to public consultation, and we've heard from Alan in terms of some feedback. I would say that if there is other feedback for staff, particularly if it's sort of in that minor editorial or things that you think could be improved, just feed that through directly to Anita, Lorraine and Robin, and they will pick that up when the final version comes to council. Obviously, substantive changes to the content will need to be discussed at that council meeting. But if you've got things that you think can be improved, then send them through. And then we're saying that recommends to council that just gonna find and get it that recommends to council that the composition of the hearings panel is solely regional councils and includes 3.
That's
what I'm saying.
Okay, so and then delegates the chief executive for minor editorial changes. So that's all correct. And moved by Kate, seconded by Councillor Weir. All in favour of A through E.
Was that actually the recommendation that was voiced to us by staff? Because I thought you said that you wanted to spread over each area.
We'd be comfortable with 3 or 5.
3 or 5,
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Are you okay with this? No?
Yeah, I can make a decision from that, yeah.
Is anybody else got anything to discuss to put forward? No, do you want to vote or apply? Anything?
No. I'll ask my other question, which I've just realised I had later.
We'll get a carry on, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Lovely, carried, thank you. So, moving on to 9.4, the Super Gold concession on Route 1, 9.4. Okay, so we'll take it as read, but we're being asked to note the report and recommend that Super Gold B card concession is not applied, and direct staff to communicate this decision with the Waikato Community Board and to general public. Any questions of staff? Would you have anything to say about this?
Look, I think your public forum summed up where we got to with this reasonably well. Councillor Wilson, thank you brought this to our attention. We thought it was useful to have a paper. I agree that if there's a change in direction, we should be communicating that really clearly, and that hasn't happened in this instance. So we would like your direction so that we can make sure that we do that, and it's so that nobody's caught out and put in an awkward situation.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Wilson, and then Noon, and then Nikki.
It has been a really interesting exercise, and thank you, Giselle, for raising it with us. The question is, and I suppose it's really one under these, the opportunity of the regional passenger transport plan is for people to submit that services should be provided to Super Gold as a priority potentially. And when I did examine this, and thank you again for providing the timetables, it's really clear that you can't get on a bus to go on that route north with a Super Gold because there isn't one within the timeframes now. Is that correct?
Yes, yep, that's correct.
And would that, if you're looking at connectivity and accessibility, especially if we change the zonal system, would be that would be the opportunity to do it under the RPTP to discuss and debate those who submit on
it. The council can look at the time period for when it applies the Super Gold, being mindful that if they choose a time period different to what is funded by NZTA, then that would apply, then we wouldn't receive the co-funding for that.
That's not, sorry, that's not the question I was asking, but I understand it. The question I was asking is, if people with a Super Gold card want to interact and submit, the time to do that would be the RPTP to say that
yes,
there should be at least one service provided within those timeframes.
And just for context, Julian advises me the timetable was designed by the community board in this instance, and we adopted it. So if they've got feedback, then the RPTP is the right avenue.
Thank you.
Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And just with regards to recommendation 2, if there was a time frame associated with that perhaps lined up with the adoption of the RPTP, would staff have any comment about that?
It's entirely your call. I mean, the paper was to have the conversation. There's absolutely benefit in giving people time to adjust to the change if we're making it. And just, I guess, the awareness is that if we are allowing people to use their Super Gold on one route outside of the hours, that you are fully bearing that cost of $2 for a few passengers.
Thank you, Councillor Meffer, Malcolm, then Watson.
Just some clarification around then the funding of the Super Gold card. The question I asked before was sort of in relation to this. So it's fully funded from the government, is that right? So there's no financial benefit for us in scrapping this access?
Only off-peak travel is funded. On-peak travel, Super Gold card payers, users pay.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just trying to understand why you want to scrap the Super Gold card on this route, because there's no financial cost to us.
So at the moment,
not actually it.
The bus leaves in a peak time when the people should be paying.
Yeah.
But we had an agreement that we would allow them access because it was the only half an hour route back.
Okay, sorry. And the other question that I have is just some Super Gold holders will have community service cards. Do we take that into consideration at all? I mean, I guess there's a type of superunion to it. One that has a Super Gold card and is reasonably well off, and the other who has a community services card who is struggling. So I'm just asking if you take these into consideration.
So anyone who has a community services card can use that. So for the Super Newton, they could use it off-peak for the community service concession. They would still use the Super Gold in peak, other way around. During peak off peak, they would still use the Super Gold because then it's a free trip for them.
So as I understand, people will often have two B cards, one that they use off peak. Because if they're a superannuation, it gets them a free bus fare, and then one that they may use on peak, especially if they've got a community services card that gets them a concession during the peak time where they can't get a free fare.
So it is taken into consideration. if there's a
It can be if
community
people set themselves up that way, and I've heard our CX team doing that already.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm, then Robertson. Then
No, questions answered. Thank
Was
you.
answered?
Yep.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. That was partly my question, but the other bit was, although picking up just before 3 p.m, we've had to answer that government funding for super gold holders. Wouldn't there be a cost to us that is incorporated into the contract for a bus that's sitting around for 40 minutes? Surely as well, because there'd be some cost that the operator has to bear.
Through the chair, I think that's right. They'll be paying the driver for a longer period of time than they otherwise may need to if they have to get to the starting point early.
Thank you, Councillor Webb.
I was just sort of wondering if this is something that could be proposed in the RPTP, to go out to consult with the community to hear how this might affect them before we put it in place, or is that impractical?
I don't know that we'd have time to change the RPTP, but we could ask a question in the RPTP if you decided to continue allowing that access in the interim in that period.
Councillor Wilson.
Well, on that point, because I forgot to ask it in the last paper, I'm going to be cheeky enough to ask it now. Legal consultation proposed for the RPTP doesn't actually include many people that get on this route. I don't think there's one in Wekawaiti or Waitete. In the proposition, I think it's on Maroon and Dunedin in Moscow. And I'm just wondering, should there be, is there an option in the consultation to be either providing on Zoom online or if there are enough people who want to get together and or using community boards to do that sort of consultation? It's the alternative consultation that wasn't clear in that paper.
We are a little bit time limited. I think if there was a critical mass of people, then we'd do our best to turn up to that meeting and speak with them.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got to move on the seconder.
So, sorry,
I know
can we,
you have questions.
Councillor Noakes foreshadowed a motion that I'm just working on, can we take a 5-minute adjournment? And then when we come back, he will be able to clarify.
Great, thank you. Move on seconder, please.
For adjournment.
For adjournment.
I move that we go adjourn.
And Councillor Robertson and Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Moving into adjournment for 5 minutes. Okay, we'll reconvene this meeting now. So we'll open the meeting again. We have some changed recommendations. So we're going to. Do we put any discussion on this or some questions
Andrew's
first?
still gonna move it.
Yeah.
Just confirm it, so that's up there now.
I'm happy to move those three recommendations.
It's now moving all three. Do we have time for any questions on that? Can we ask questions on that new recommendation?
We can provide any clarifications.
Does anybody want any clarification of that? Councillor Malcolm.
With the indulgence, is that two saying that I can use my Supercard Gold to go to Dunedin on the off-peak one in the morning, and I can still get home with the advantages of that card on the night service?
Not the night service, just the afternoon, the one that looks like.
Yeah, sorry, the afternoon one, other way around, sorry, yeah.
Councillor Ware.
Is this directing staff to include a question in the RPTP on this? Or
No,
just saying we'll make
it's
a
not.
decision later on?
So what we're saying is that a decision on this matter will need to be made through the RPTP. And staff will pick this up and make sure that that's part of the process.
And in the meantime, we're effectively extending the Super Gold to include the first
Single service.
afternoon service.
That will be paying.
Yeah, that will be at a cost.
Yeah.
So that's what you'll move, is that, did you remember? Second, happy to second. Oh, you've done that? Sorry, mate, sorry, yeah, I just didn't hear that. Yeah.
That's moved, known, seconded Councillor Ware, and any further discussion? Councillor.
Look, the reasonably clear message from the presenter at the earlier in the meeting. It's about messaging, and we pretty much everything we do, we generally consult at a stage where it gives people the information about potential changes going forward, and B, just keeps them informed of the process in terms of timing. And in this situation, it was potentially going to change overnight, and I think around fairness and meeting our obligations under the Local Government Act, this is probably a pretty sound way to go.
Thank you. So I'll put that motion. I'd actually like to thank Giselle for bringing this to our attention and having this discussion today. So thank you, everybody. Is there any further discussion? Anybody got us? To Councillor.
It's just around, I mean, there's a little bit of insufficient information here. What is the cost to the council? And if I'm keen to do this, this is good, but what, do we have any idea of how much it will cost?
1,500.
So this is a bus service that we run that does not attract NZTA subsidies, so we're putting the bus on anyway. We're anticipating that there are one or two people getting on the service a few times a week. So the cost is very low.
No cost to us.
Paragraph 13.
Would you like to read it out, Mr. Somerville?
You can read.
So can I just provide some further comment? I think that the financial issue here is negligible. We're talking very, very small amounts of money. Through the RPTP, you will need to give some consideration to precedent and to achieving the outcome set by the government through the GPS. That's the bigger question. And I think the motion that's been put forward is entirely appropriate and consistent with other decisions that tables made around making those decisions through the RPTP process, similar to the private revenue paper, private share paper we bought 2 weeks ago, I think. So for context, Tim, it's a good question. Negligible is the answer. The bigger picture is probably the more important thing to consider.
Councillor Robertson, then Councillor Wilson.
I'll just
You
someone
are?
else said it.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
I just want to add the other context, and thank you for that, very wise counsel from the CE, because the other precedent that we've got here is that we change services because the Ministry of Education pulled out and we prioritise children, maybe many of them, over elderly sometimes. And those are a disconnect when it's about connecting people to where they have lived and probably can't move. It's a real disconnect in our thinking when we're talking about equity and accessibility. So I think it's absolutely welcome, the motion, because I think it's a right place that we should be having these discussions. But also we need to be really clear that there will be the ministry pulling out from more bus routes and putting this situation squarely on our table again. And our response may not be to change a bus route time, albeit there was some sway in there, but be putting on more buses rather than having the effect on taking and excluding super card people by the very nature of a low population getting the benefit that they would get anywhere else in a public transport service in New Zealand.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? No, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? No, motion carried. Thank you very much. And thank you to the transport team. It's been a really good set of reports and it's been very clear and we've figured out what we want to do. So that's great. Thank you very, very much. And with that, we actually close this meeting early. Thank you everybody for your attendance. I'll leave the karakia. We'll close the karakia later in the day. And thank you to Cara on your first day. A couple of things you had to do on the fly. Thank you.
So just while you are all here, we've the fabulous Robin and our transport team's actually done a research project on bus egressing, giving way on roads. So we've seen that around